This video is once again for and about America's farmers. But it's also for all of the rest of us as well, because farmers are the backbone of America and we eat what they grow and produce. What happens to America's farmers, whether they are MAGA or not, impacts all of us. My most viral videos have all been about America's farmers and about our food systems. Pre this whole nightmare that we're in now, I talked a lot about resilient local agriculture, building up robust local food economies, how important it is to keep our food chains short. How that's good for us, it's good for our farmers, it's good for our economy of our communities and our states. It's good for the environment, and it helps us become more resilient, better able to bounce back quickly from adverse events. Events like shipping crises, events like droughts, events like the bird flu. I'm going to have a whole bunch of videos from years gone by about how it also helps us create local food cultures. It enriches our experience as eaters. It helps us have more close-knit communities. It improves our quality of life in so many kind of intangible ways. Or not even intangible, but ways that cannot be quantified by somebody's spreadsheet that shows you profit margins. But today I want to talk about something that RFK said a few days ago, and I'm sorry I meant to cover this earlier, but I've been so busy, about how our Swiss cheese brain health secretary wants to respond to the bird flu and what that's going to mean for our health, for America's poultry farmers and America's cattle farmers as well. So I would like to read to you a little bit from an article in Scientific American. It came out March 19th. Side note here, if you want to understand my childhood a little bit better, for my 12th birthday, my dad got me a subscription to Scientific American. Up until that point, as a child, I had been reading like Discover and National Geographic, but my dad was like, you need some harder hitting science. Read from that what you will. Anyway, okay. With H5N1 avian influenza spreading in poultry flocks, Secretary of Health and Human Services Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is pushing a new plan. Just let the virus rip. Kennedy recently told Fox News that by letting the highly pathogenic bird flu spread throughout flocks, farmers could identify the birds and preserve the birds that are immune to it. Now, I understand how a scientifically illiterate vaccine denier like RFK could think this is a good idea. Right? You already know there's no plan to have a flu vaccine in the fall, right? That RFK Jr., Elon Musk, and their ilk are eugenicists. They want to weed out the weak ones. So, like, you're either strong enough to develop natural immunity. Again, not how the flu works. That's why we have a flu shot every season. Why someone is in charge of our public health who does not understand basic virology. Yeah, I mean, I understand that's on purpose. Having incompetent folks in charge is a strategic move. But it's like, it's all well and good if most of y'all die, because the strong, the ones who have a natural immunity, the ones who survive are the ones worthy of reproducing and carrying on the species. That's exactly what he is advocating for here with America's poultry farms. Sure, just let the bird flu rip through millions and millions and millions of birds. Whichever chickens are left standing at the end of it, that's our breeding population. Again, this man does not understand how bird flu works, and he doesn't understand anything about agriculture or virology at all. Okay, I'm editorializing a little too much. Let me get back to the article. But poultry experts say that in addition to causing an unimaginable poultry death toll, this plan won't work. No, not for this disease, says Rocky Crespo, a poultry veterinarian at the North Carolina State University College of Vet Medicine. This is crazy. Farmers must currently cull infected flocks to contain the disease before it spreads. They're financially compensated for the culled birds by the USDA. The policy is supported by science because highly pathogenic avian influenza is so deadly on its own, it will kill between 90 and 100% of chickens within 3 to 4 days. That's according to Matt Koke, an immunologist and virologist at North Carolina State University's Poultry Science Department. The disease overwhelms birds, Crespo says. It's devastating, she says. It's a disease that attacks every single organ. As a result, the chickens never develop the antibodies that would beat back the flu and give them the ability to survive a second encounter with the virus. They die too quickly. This means there is little for scientists to study to develop treatments or uncover some genetic secret for resistance, Kochi says. Genetic resistance in chickens and turkeys is not a thing. Even with avian diseases that are slower acting than the highly pathogenic bird flu, scientists have struggled to find a key to genetic resistance. Huai-Jun Zhou, a professor of animal science at the University of California, Davis, worked on a project on Newcastle disease. I have a friend who lost her entire flock to Newcastle disease. It's devastating. It's a viral illness that is also nearly always fatal in poultry, but that some infected birds can survive for weeks. We didn't find any magic bullet. There were genetic variants in chickens that allowed the birds to survive longer with Newcastle disease, yet each one had a tiny effect, and it took a combination of hundreds of them to make a noticeable difference in survival. It's just the nature of the disease, says Joe, adding that the bird flu's high mortality rate makes success even less likely. We have a complete fuckwit in charge of our public health and our nation's food supply. What he is advocating for actively harms farmers and risks human lives. Kennedy's remarks belie a lack of knowledge about the way poultry breeding works, Kochi says. The chickens that provide meat and eggs are not in the breeding population. They're the product of parent generations that are bred to maximize disease resistance and meat and egg production. Wiping out the working offspring of these breeders wouldn't do anything to alter the next generation of chickens coming down the line. That's absolutely true. Another problem with the let it rip strategy would be the inability of farmers to sell chicken products internationally, because the policy would lead to importers banning American poultry products. Again, I have speculated about how the desire to drive family farmers out of business so that they have to sell their farms and big ag can buy up the land and consolidate their production and their power. That is part of what Trump and Musk want to do. They want to hurt family farmers. They want to drive them out of business, even though those farmers overwhelmingly voted for them. Keep in mind the resulting mass poultry death we would experience under RFK's Let It Rip plan would make today's egg prices look like a great deal. The Chick-fil-A's and the Kentucky Fried Chickens and all the chicken dinners you have, forget it, Crespo says, gone. Culling and containment have been a successful strategy for controlling bird flu in the U.S. since the 1980s. This currently circulating strain, however, has thrown a wrench in the system by finding new ways onto poultry farms. In the past, bird flu has spread to new farms through the droppings of infected migratory birds, meaning the danger was largely limited to summer and fall when these birds passed through. Now the disease is in a non-migratory bird population as well as mammals. Bird flu is endemic in America's cattle. Cats can transmit bird flu and other small mammals as well. The risk is now year-round, and scientists are not entirely sure as to how it is getting onto farms. I know for us, we have added a completely enclosed portion of our chicken and duck run. My birds used to free range in a rotational paddock system in my backyard, and they are no longer allowed to do that because I don't want them interacting with the wild bird population and their droppings. We're trying to understand, can we figure out these other point sources, and can we change how we do biosecurity, Kochi says. In the long term, Joe says that researchers are looking at genetic variations in the way poultry respond to vaccination. Currently, vaccines are not used because although they can keep the chickens alive, they don't prevent infection. Before anti-vaxxers come in my comments, that is specifically for bird flu vaccines used on chickens and turkeys, not vaccines in general. Okay, skipping down a little bit. Kennedy does not have a say in the U.S.'s agricultural policies. But as the New York Times reported last week, Secretary of Agriculture Brooke Rollins, and I have talked about her before, she's the one who said, despite bird flu, despite the economic hardships, every American should just get chickens. This is a great opportunity for you to have chickens in your own backyard. We don't need to address the ridiculous price of eggs or the bird flu crisis. Just get your own chickens. Put a vector in your backyard for bird flu. Obligate yourself to that time and financial investment. That's all you need to know about our Secretary of Ag, Brooke Rollins. She indicated support for the Let It Rip idea as well, telling Fox News that some farmers are interested in piloting this strategy. Please don't. Please don't. In a statement from this regime, Emily Hilliard, the deputy press secretary at the Department of Health and Human Services, said, "We want to keep people away from the most dangerous versions of the current bird flu, which is found in chickens. Culling puts people at the highest risk of exposure." That's not true, which is why Secretary Kennedy and the NIH want to limit culling activities. Culling is not the solution. Strong biosecurity is. She has no fucking clue what she's talking about. Viral spread leads to more viral particles in the environment, begetting more viral spread, Crespo says. A no-call policy would expose more farm workers to more sick chickens, increasing the risk. Kochi says you're exposing more humans to more chickens and just buying more lottery tickets for the pandemic strain. I know that this regime is doing a million different horrible things and has a million different kleptocrats who are completely incompetent. But for me, as a person whose work is about sustainable agriculture and resilient food systems, the rage I feel at RFK being in this position and at Brooke Rollins being our Secretary of Ag, there's no limit to it. There's no limit to it. I can barely read these articles. It did not have to be this way. It should not be this way. America's farmers, when you're suffering, understand it is the Trump regime doing this to you. It is the willful incompetence. It is part of the plan to drive you out of business and to maximize suffering for every working class person. It should not be this way. It does not need to be this way.